After a 2-year-long wait, the Rings of Power Season 2 has finally arrived, and if you want to check out our review and discussion of the first 3 episodes, then check the video from earlier in the day. Otherwise, here was a breakdown and Easter egg look at the first 3 episodes, especially for fans who of course know the lore or want to see some cool moments that you could have missed from the first episodes. Please make sure to like and subscribe and to consider donating to our Patreon, which always helps the channel as well. But without further ado, let's just get right into it. Sauron's prologue uncovers many truths. First of all, we finally get a look at how Adar killed Sauron and their confrontation at Waldreg. We now know the reason why Adar didn't recognize Halbrand in Season 1 Episode 7, which is because during the dawn of the First Age, Sauron was adopting the form and appearance of Slow Horse's star, Jack Lodin. Jack Lodin Sauron interestingly mentions the quote seen and unseen world, and in his dialogue essentially describes to the orcs the process and effect that the Rings of Power would have later on, whether purposefully or coincidentally. Quote, "For I seek a new kind of power, not of flesh but over flesh, the power of the unseen world, one that we shall use to enslave the peoples of Middle-earth to our very will." This could be linked to the power of the rings ultimately enslaving the bearers to the will of Sauron that we see especially with the Nazgul. Next up, we have the King of the Southland's title and sigil finally answered. Sauron dies and becomes Halbrand, and we know that he gets the sigil of the King of the Southlands from the ancestor of one of the servants to the king back in the day. Interestingly, the part on the boat after the nightmare is probably the point where in a previous interview Charlie Vickers mentions that at the start of Season 2 there was a part where Sauron nearly repents and almost feels bad for his actions. Maybe this part talking to this person after his nightmare was that moment. The foreshadowing of Elrond. Elrond is adamant that the rings must be destroyed, which is a clear foreshadowing and a call to of course him telling Isildur to destroy the ring into the fires of Mount Doom. This seems like an almost ironic character trait that he will adopt throughout the show, probably until he takes the ring after Gil-galad's fall. Halbrand's manipulation of Adar. When Halbrand meets Adar for the first time in Season 2, Halbrand expertly mentions the powers of the unseen world that Adar had mentioned to Galadriel in Season 1 Episode 7, which of course Adar had originally heard from Sauron as we saw in the prologue scene, which is what initially makes Adar not turn Halbrand away straight away or even kill him, because there must be some truth to it due to this link. Halbrand ends up pretending that Sauron and Galadriel are collaborating and that he has the trust of the elves, so he should go and sort it out, which is very clever as it is of course a lie, but gives Adar reason to let him go and essentially become Annatar in Eregion. The stranger's identity revelation teased. The stranger mentions his home quote beyond the sunset, which is probably in relation to Valinor, and later in episode 2 with Poppy when they are making up fake names for him, he mentions that a name is not made up but given, implying that he already has a name and identity and he doesn't need a new one. So hopefully this is the beginning of the building blocks of finally finding out the identity of the stranger, and they're building up to the fact that he does already have an identity, and we should find out by the end of this season. Waldreg's irony. It is of course without a doubt ironic that Waldreg ends up dying at the hands of Sauron after spending the whole of Season 1 essentially looking for him and even worshipping him, especially given the fact he was actually beating his original master when he was hitting Halbrand with the hammer and torturing him. Círdan references the sea. The sea is always right. The sea is always right, and right it was by throwing away the 3 elven rings straight away. Though it was nice to see reference to the sinking of Beleriand by Círdan and reference to the Valar Ulmo, who is the master of the seas. We get to see Círdan's wisdom when showing the effects of the ring Naria in the water and the potent effects it may have, and to also show Elrond that the 3 Elven rings in fact do not potentially have Sauron's taint, which of course in the lore they do not. They were made separately. Lindon lights up and is freed. Of course, the final moments of episode 1 is showing the healing effects of the Elven Rings of Power, with the poison and decay in Lindon going away. The healing of the nature and the preservation of light, but also of the elves' life, is seen on display here and links to Galadriel's monologue in The Lord of the Rings about the preservation effects of the Elven Rings and how it keeps the Elven realm safe and secure. Celebanna foreshadowed to Galadriel. This scene is a clear nod as to what is to come with Celebrimbor this season and his relationship with Annatar, where we see him chained to the trunk of the linden tree by the roots, tied up and killed, with the tips of the roots passing through him and him becoming a statue. A clear foreshadowing to his eventual death by Banner at the hands of Sauron, which we may see this season. A cool little Easter egg is when Gil-galad mentions, quote, clouds black covering over white towers, which is of course in relation to the black clouds of Sauron over Celebrimbor's tower in Eregion, which is often the focal point and stands out in wide shots of Eregion. However, this could also be a cool nod and link to the dark clouds of Sauron looming over the white towers of Minas Tirith in The Lord of the Rings, and that Sauron uses as a way to support his orc army as they march to siege the White City. The return of Slim Shady. The Dweller, Bridie Sisson, returns, and we have finally found her master that she was working for, which was Ciarán Hinds' evil wizard character. He clearly has a staff and distinct magical abilities, so it is curious as to who he truly is, with a resemblance to Christopher Lee Saruman quite noticeable. The duo have the same inkling about the rings. It is clear that both Elrond and Durin the Fourth are against the idea of the Rings of Power and don't trust the process of the ring making. Elrond in season 1 was able to suss out that the identity of Halbrand was fake and everyone was being lied to. Durin the Fourth has this near exact same reaction and instantly doesn't trust Annatar when in Eregion, and maybe this is a testament to their friendship and bond that they are both able to see beyond the deception, while others, and mainly their seniors around them, Gil-galad and Durin the Third respectively, don't, and instead fall right for it. The person behind the mask. It is interesting that the show focused on this regular soldier of the evil wizard putting himself forward despite the evil wizard having stronger servants, and he even mentions that you are just a man, a normal person with no abilities. The fact this scene was even in the show raises some eyebrows as to maybe there could be more to this mortal and average person that meets the eye. Maybe there is someone of importance behind the mask. Annatar's revelation. As mentioned in the appendices and the unfinished tales, Annatar uses his quote servant and emissary of the Valar ploy that Tolkien created for the character, and as in the lore, Celebrimbor believes it right away. It was interesting that in Annatar's explanation of himself, he mentions that there are quote forces beyond good and evil, which is of course somewhat reminiscent of Gandalf's famous passage and dialogue to Frodo in Moria in The Lord of the Rings. The return of Shelob. The spider returns once again in a Tolkien adaptation and is much smaller than we see in The Lord of the Rings, but this whole passage with Isildur is reminiscent of the horror aspects that we see in Peter Jackson's movies when Frodo was in Shelob's lair. Isildur's fate foreshadowed. When Isildur looks into the pond/body of the water and sees those dead sunken soldiers, It makes one instantly think of his own death and demise, and how it was depicted in the Lord of the Rings movies, with him being shot by Orcarrow and falling into a river and dying a similar death. So maybe there is some slight foreshadowing happening here. Ents on the horizon. It wouldn't be Lord of the Rings without some Ents, and that seems like the thing that picked Theo up at the end of episode 3. And Theo actor Tyro Murphydine did mention that he will have his own Merry and Pippin moment this season, and that looks like that's what we could be seeing next episode in episode 4. But that is the full round of Easter eggs and breakdown for the first 3 episodes. Let us know if we missed anything and your thoughts on the first few episodes. Please make sure again to like and subscribe, but without further ado, we will see you in the next video and for episode 4. Goodbye.